So this quick clip is going to focus on the hips and the glutes. This is a big problem area for folks, maybe even more specifically into the low back. People come in to the facility and we always ask what sort of injuries they've had in the past or are dealing with currently. And low back pain is common, tight hips is common, shoulders also. But, for this particular clip, we're going to focus on some movements that hopefully will help with that. I think a common problem is we just are too sedentary, particularly in our poor postures as well. We sit too much. We get up out of bed and we sit for breakfast, then we sit in our car and drive to work, then we sit at work all day for 8+ hours, then we just reverse it, sit in the car, sit for dinner. So we're always in this forward postured position, really tight hip flexors, weak glutes, dead glutes for lack of a better term, forward rounding of the shoulders. So focusing in this area, we want to try to get some movements that maybe will help kind of open us up a little bit, activate the backside, and strengthen both the front and the back. So this little 5 movement series is something that you could do at home. It just takes 5 minutes to roll through a couple of rounds of these. If you're dealing with it in the morning, part of your warm-up before a workout, or like I said, at night when you get home from work. So I'm just going to get right into it and go through these moves. So this first one is called a 90-90. It's a FRC inspired movement. FRC stands for Functional Range Conditioning, which is kind of a movement system that's gaining in popularity, and that's where I got this movement from. It's a mobility drill, and we could be talking semantics a little bit, but there's a difference between mobility and flexibility, at least from what I've learned in the philosophy that I follow. Basically, just a simple way to differentiate would be mobility is more active flexibility in a sense. So flexibility is more passive. So if you were stretching your chest out and just kind of put my hand here, just hung out here, I'm very passive right now. I'm hanging out on the joint. It feels good, it's a good stretch, as opposed to an active mobility drill where I'm trying actually not touching that and seeing if I can get myself here and stay here. So I'm working on range of motion, but I'm very active the whole time. So that's just active versus passive. So these mobility, this particular one, is called a 90-90 hip drill, and it's going to be a very active drill. So that's why I'm terming it a mobility drill. So movement number 1, again, I'm going to roll through the 5 now. So 90-90, basically I'm referring to the joints or the knee angle. So the leg comes right out in front, we're at 90 degrees. So just position that lower limb to make sure we're at 90, and then the leg off to the side about 90 degrees. Now in this particular exercise, do as I say, not as I do necessarily. I've got pretty tight hips, so this is a drill that I've incorporated into my warm-ups every day. And I'm getting better, but it's a tough one for me. So the goal ultimately, I want to sit up as tall as I can. I'm going to my goal is to get in this position and just facing the opposite direction. So the sequence, I'm going to sit tall. I'm going to lead with the side knee. So the side knee, I'm going to open it up as far as I can. And some folks can get their knee up here, almost just about perpendicular with the ground. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to open this knee up as wide as I can. Unfortunately, that's about as far as mine goes. So I'm going to continue to drive my knee that way as I start to rotate. Again, I'm trying to sit tall, keep the knees apart, and I'm very active the whole time. I'm driving my knees out, and I'm going to keep going. Boom. So I'm facing the opposite direction. I'm in the same position. I've got roughly 90 degrees at the joints. I'm sitting up as tall as I can, and I'm going to go back. Again, side knee. Open it up as wide as I can, and then start to bring the rest of the body over. Slow motion. The goal isn't speed here. I always say big and slow, big and slow. So I'm trying to get big, opening, and I'm trying to move through quicksand, sit up tall, sit up tall, sit up tall. Okay? And I'll just finish it up with one more. So this is one you could do 3, 4, 5 reps of, as long as you're focusing on the big and slow. Okay, so that's number 1, the 90-90 hip drill. The second one is going to be a hip flexor stretch, which a lot of people do variations of. This particular one, I call it an active hip flexor stretch, and I'll explain why. So there's different variations, like I said. So for this one, we're going to get in this position right here. If you're really tight up into the hip flexor down to the quad, you may feel this stretch already. So where I position the knee in relation to my anchor point here will determine the intensity. The further the knee is away from the box, the easier the stretch is on me. So if I put that knee right up against, and then I come up here and try to sit tall, that's a lot tighter. So I'm going to kind of find a spot that works for me. So once I'm here, One mistake we see too often is from here, people just kind of lean into it. I'm getting into the capsule a little bit, but I'm not really actively stretching those muscles as effective as I can. So what I'm gonna do, it may be a little bit hard to see in the video, but from this position, I'm sitting up relatively tall, and right now my pelvis is tilted forward. I'm in an anterior tilt, okay? So if I didn't have skin or clothes, you'd see my bone structure is kind of pointed down here like this. So what I wanna actively do is think about tucking my butt underneath me, okay? Squeezing my butt and trying to level my pelvis out. So when I tuck my hips, tuck my butt, boom, there. Now I've kind of leveled my pelvis out, and now it makes that stretch so much more active, but so much more intense. And I'm gonna hold that position for about a 10 count. And then you could almost do this as reps if you want for now. Just relax it for about a 5 count and then tuck it under again. So I'm tilting the pelvis, boom, holding that stretch for a 10 count and then releasing. So if I had a laser beam on my belly button, right now it's pointed down a little bit. I'm gonna try to tuck my butt, tuck my pelvis, boom, now my belly button laser is pointed forward. I've never used that term before, but I like it. I'm gonna hold that for a 10 count again and then relax. So 3 10 counts would work, and then go to the other side, okay? This is something you could do. You don't need a box, obviously. You could use a wall. You could use a bench. You could use your couch or a bed at home, anything that you can get your leg up on. Okay, so that's number 2. Obviously, you do both sides. Now we went from the floor to kneeling. Now we're gonna go standing. This is gonna be a standing hip circle. So again, you don't need a box, just an object. Actually, you don't need an object. I like to have one just so we have some external feedback. A bench, again, you could do it off the corner of your couch or bed. The goal on this, just like the 90-90, big and slow are two words I like to use. So I'm gonna bring my knee up. I'm gonna drive it up as high as I can, actively. So I'm not holding on, okay? I'm actively holding it there. Then I'm gonna bring that knee out as far as it'll go. Again, for me, it's a little limited. I'm trying to stand as tall as I can. I'm gonna start to drive that leg back as far as I can. Swing it on through, so I'm just drawing a circle. So these are called hip circles. Think about drawing a circle with the knee. Bring it back to the starting position, and then I'm gonna reverse it. So I'm gonna bring the knee down, out, up. Ooh. So this works balance as well. Get that knee up, and I'm trying to avoid the box the whole time and bring it through. So you could treat that as 1 rep. I went circle one direction, circle the other direction. That's one you could do for 2 or 3 reps. For this one, as far as technique, I want to try to stand as tall as I can and keep the upper body quiet. And what I mean by that is when you come up and start to circle, you don't want to tilt forward here like this. So I'm trying to focus and isolate, if you will, on moving just through the hip joint and the glute, activating the glute as I drive that leg back. So I don't want to just move the whole body. Whoops. I don't want to just move the whole body the whole time. Okay, again, I'm trying to stay quiet and just focus on isolating. So when I hip extend here, my glute, I'm squeezing the heck out of it, trying to get up and challenging that range of motion and staying under control, okay? Obviously 2 to 3 on each side. So that was movement 3. So all 3 of those are kind of mobility, in a sense, drills, the activation drills. So semantics, I'm using terms interchangeably, mobility, activation. We're just trying to get into this hip joint, activate that dead glute, for lack of a better term, like I said earlier. Last 2 moves, bridges, another common one. And there's a ton of variations for these. There's the hip thrust with the upper back elevated, or just trying to do these with minimal equipment. So for this one, just a regular hip bridge or glute bridge, this is the movement that we're gonna focus on. And I'm gonna show you, if you have some sort of cuff or band here, I like these a lot, and I'm gonna use these for the last 2 movements. These are very inexpensive. We get these from Perform Better. They're about less than $2 a piece, I believe. So for this version, I'm gonna put these just below the knee. The reason I like these for these last 2 exercises is they force some adduction, which I don't want. So they're trying to actually put us in incorrect position, excuse me. So we've got to force the knees out, little external rotation of the hips, and abduction of the legs, so we're getting a little bit more glute activation. So I'm gonna lay on my back. I don't want any rib flare, so I want to keep my ribs down, okay? Feet are about hip width apart, and I'm just gonna focus on 2 things. Driving my knees out the whole time, so I'm just keeping a constant pressure out the whole throughout the movement, and as I lift, I'm focusing on squeezing the glutes hard at the top. So that glute squeeze and then coming back down, okay? I'm trying not to overextend and get into my low back, okay? I'm just really focusing on squeezing the glutes. As far as pelvis, much like the hip flexor stretch, I don't want to be too much in an anterior tilt, so I'm trying to keep a little bit of posterior tilt and trying to maintain that, ideally more of a neutral position throughout the exercise. And again, getting that glute squeeze at the top. So it's simply up, squeeze the glute, and release. Up, squeeze the glute, release. This could be definitely a higher rep exercise. I'd say 15, 20, even 25 reps. All right? And then from there, you can just lower the band down to the ankles. Gonna hop up for our last movement. Positioning of this can vary as well, but basically the lower you go, the more intense the movement is. So you could have it above the knees if you're just starting, below the knee to the ankle. You could even bring it out here across the foot. This is probably the most common position, so we'll just keep it here for now. So for this last one, we're just gonna do a lateral band walk. Get a little bit more into the glute med. So slight bend in the hips and knees, kind of an athletic position. And I'm just gonna do, for the purposes of this, just 2 or 3 per side. So I wanna think about, as I drive out, I wanna think about 2 things here. Trying to keep this foot straight or even turned in a little bit. I don't wanna, as I go, I don't want my foot to turn out, because then I'm getting more into the front of the leg, and I wanna focus on the hips, okay? So I'm turned in slightly. The other thing is when people do this, they do the movement, looks fine. They're just kind of going through the motions as opposed to being a little bit more active. So as I go to my left, I want to think about actively driving with my right leg. So I'm pushing that leg into the ground and then coming. Push in and then drive this one out. Push in, drive out. Notice the feet, I'll go one more this way, are staying forward. So as I step, I'm not turning that foot, okay? Pushing with my left, driving out with my right. Push and drive. Push and drive, okay? Staying in that slightly bent hip and knee position. I'll do one more, and head back. And I just did, what, a couple each side, and I'm already feeling the glutes turning on, okay? So those 5 movements, I know I got a little long-winded, but 90-90 hips, the active hip flexor stretch, what was the third one? The standing hip circles. Then our 2 more activation-specific drills for the glutes, the bridges and the band walks. You could do a couple, I'll write up some rep sets and rep schemes for you, but really once you could fly through that in 5 minutes if you had to, if you were short on time, or just pick 2 or 3 of them. But ideally, if you have enough time, 2 or 3 rounds of those 5 exercises, and your hips will appreciate it.